GT. I'm super excited about this because I have so much good stuff. Okay, so I got this new thing. So I call this file Intendo Rev. It's basically revenue from a fake game company called Intendo. You never heard of it because it doesn't exist. Okay, so library GT, we need that, gotta have it. And then we're going to do library Intendo. It's a hard package to get. It's on GitHub. If you just search it up, you will find it. And the cool thing about it is it has data sets of different sizes. And we'll use one of those data sets for this. It'll be so nice. And I like to library in tidyverse because we're going to use all sorts of tidyverse before making the actual table, the data table. And then we're going to get in liberdate because we're going to do some date and time stuff. And I'm never sure whether that's included in tidyverse. I think it isn't. Okay, so great. So I'm going to get all the revenue just by assigning it to this. And okay, so Intendo has a bunch of like data sets. Like all revenue, all sessions, I'm going to get the revenue. So I'm going to do that right here. The default options are good. This is like the size of the data set. We'll just go for a small because we don't want to tax the system too much. So we're going to get the data, doing some stuff here, but it just downloads the data from the repo. And now we can totally see it. I'm going to make the console just a bit bigger because we'll do some console stuff initially. So lots of rows of data, like nearly 200,000. Whoa. Okay, it's a lot of revenue. This company's doing well, which is great. Good for Intendo. But it has lots of countries in it. And we're going to filter down this data quite a bit. We're going to actually make something super narrow. So in the end, we definitely don't want more than like 50 rows, I think, to fit a table on the screen. So we're going to heavily summarize this. So first thing we're going to do is make a vector for subsetting the countries. Okay. So I'll just say countries to consider. So I'll call it countries considered. And then I'm just going to make a vector of the countries I know using like the 2-letter codes. So I think it's US, Great Britain. We'll put in DE, CH. We'll make it a top 8. Norway, this is Canada. Then we'll do India and Spain, which is ES. So that's 8, right? Yeah, that's totally 8. Perfect. I'll keep on the same line. Good. So now we have this. This is some sort of prep work we need to do. So we have that. Now we need to get, well, first of all, we have all these times for the revenue. We want to break it down to just each month. We're going to summarize for each month what the revenue was for each type of revenue. Just to go over this table a bit. So I'll tell you exactly what this all is. So each player in the game has an ID. Each time they play the game, they have a session, and that has an ID as well. There's a session start and the time of the revenue event. So each row is a revenue event, like a purchase of something. And they can buy either an IAP, which is an in-app purchase, usually some sort of like currency or secondary currency or some game item or some special offer. That's a combination of things. And then there's the revenue associated with that, with that bought item. And actually there's 2 different types. There's also like item name might be like IAP or ads. So ad views will also result in some revenue as well. Okay, and then there's a session duration. So just the amount of time they were in that session. It's good analytics to have, see how long they were playing and what triggered the sale. A start date, this is like historical data. It's a start date for that player, so we can get the player age from that. So it's kind of like a redundant thing, but it's good to have because you can sort of segment all this data by the player age. And then we have other things to do with the player, like their acquisition, basically where they're acquired from, like what ad caused them to play the game or convert into the game. So it could be like other networks like Facebook or ads on different platforms that got them into the game. Usually they represent them with a link and then they install the app that way, the game. And then the country they're from, which is basically some course location data, which is just provided by MaxMind. Okay, so we have all that. So now we really want to just break this down into like country, month, item type, and then the total revenue. And we're going to make a table from that. It's going to be really pretty sweet. Okay, so now we got the countries considered. We explained the data a little bit there. So now we want to get the month names, because in the end, we'll just have like 1, 2, 3 till 12 as the column names. But we want to make them, like friendly, sort of like nice month names. So we'll do that. I just found this out today, actually. There's like a month name vector in R, which is kind of cool. But we just need the first 3 letters. So we'll do like substring from 1 to 3. And we'll see that it gives us just this. And then later on, we need this as a list to change the column names in GT, which is a little bit inconvenient, but that might change later. But we'll just make it a list like this. Okay, great. So now we'll just get this. I don't really like lists because they're kind of like annoying, but we have no choice. So we have to make this list. So we'll call this month names. Like so. And another sort of weird thing about GT is it needs a named list, because it has to map the column name with the new label. So these will act as labels, but we need the name of each item in the list as like the actual column name. But that's not too bad, because we know they're going to be 1 to 12. So we'll just do names, month names, so many names, as character 1 to 12. Okay, so now if we do this and we take a look at month names, we finally have this preparation step right here. This would be good for later, just doing it ahead of time, because it's kind of annoying to deal with it later. Okay, so now all the revenue. Okay, we're going to start there. We're going to build up this table like 1 line at a time, maybe bunches of lines at a time, but we'll see it every step of the way. So right now we don't even have it in GT. We still have this, and we still have to do lots of stuff before we get to GT. For instance, we need to do that month thing. So we'll do mutate. Month is going to equal liberdate. And then we want to use the month function. And then we want to use it on the time column right there. That's the time of the revenue event. Okay, I'm just going to run this. You won't see it because it's actually at the end, but trust me, it's just like the month as a number. Okay, continue. Filter. We're going to filter a lot because we don't need a ton of stuff in this table. Because we want to focus a bit. There's lots of data in this table, but we want to just focus on a few things. Otherwise, it gets too multi-dimensional. So we'll say item type is going to be just the IAP type. And again, it's in-app purchase, things people buy and not ads people watch. Okay, so that brings down the table down to 47,000 rows, which is a lot better than before. One thing we don't see here, and this is something I know from the data, is the country is like a long country name. It's not a country code, which is fine, but it's kind of big and it's kind of hard to work with. A weird thing about GT is it actually has this country pops data set, which has great data. But the cool thing is it has a bunch of country names and the country codes, and they just happen to map perfectly with this data set. So we can actually like do a join and get the country codes from this. You get the 2-letter country codes. Either one is good, but just for this one, I'm just going to work with that. So I'm going to do a left join, because we want to join that table on the existing data that is in what we have here. And it's going to be GT country pops, the data set, and we're going to filter that just by those first 2 columns. So country name, and what is the other one? Country code 2. Great. So we filter that down. Now you just get like those 2 columns. So we'll just make that distinct. So we have, just like, like 100 or so, 170 or so rows. And then we'll do by, because it'll be 2 different names. And I believe construction is the C and then 2 quoted things. This is the left side, like are all the revenue table. And this is the country pop side. So this side is going to be country name. And this one will be, I think, just country. Yeah, country. Okay, let's run this now and see if it works. Totally works. We got country code 2 in there. We'll change all these names later. Promise you that. So we did a left join. There's a ton of stuff we do before we get to a table, I know, but we got so much data. We have no choice. Okay, now we're going to do another mutate. Okay, and the thing we're going to do here is say, okay, So we have this IAPs. I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit so we can see here, because it's almost impossible to see what we have in terms of types. There we go, item names. So we have like different tiers of gold offer, and I think there's not just gold, there's also like gems, I believe. But we just want to lump them together into like one type. So all we gotta do is like take off the digit, and we don't have to do any regular expressions or anything, just take off the digit. Oh no, we do have to do a regular expression. We have to identify the digit and just take it off. Okay, but this is super simple. So we're going to call this IAP type as a new thing. And we're just going to do a G sub. Then we're going to look for any digit. So just 0 to 9. And it's only just 1. So we don't have to put any sort of star here or anything like that. And then we're just going to like replace it with nothing. And then that's going to be item name. Okay, let's see that this actually worked. Great. It did an error, which is fantastic. We got IAP type. And I'm trusting that this number is gone. So that sort of lumps things together. So we have like, less dimensions to worry about. Okay, continuing. We're going to select a few things to really narrow down this table so we actually can see it on one screen. So we're going to select a country, and that is currently as country code 2. Great. And then the other things we're going to select are month, IAP type, and what else do we need? Item revenue, of course, in that order, because like these will be things we group on, and then the last thing will just be the thing we want to summarize. Okay, let's look at this now. Great, much shorter, much less wide. Still lots of rows, but summary will take care of that. Summarize will. So we're going to group by basically all the things like month, IAP type, then country. I'm going to pass that into summarize. We're going to call this total rev, and it's just going to be the sum of item revenue. And then there's like this groups argument that I always forget to select or to use, and it always gives me a warning. So I'm just going to use it now. And I think it's drop is what you want. I'll put it on the second line. Then that's closed off. Okay, let's take a look now. Much less rows, I'm hoping. No, okay, sorry. I don't use the shortcut because I just never did do that. And maybe that's a case for doing it. Okay, much less, 765 plus 10 rows, 775. That is great. Okay, so now we're gonna arrange stuff. It's always good to arrange it and sort of see like, things make sense. So I'm gonna arrange by month, country, and IAP type, and take a look again. Great. And arranging is actually super important before you get into like GT anyways, because you're going to have like arranged data in GT. Some things you can change though. But it's good to sort of like arrange it, a bit because it's for display. Okay, now that we arranged it, we're going to use pivot wider to take the months and put them as columns. Okay, so pivot wider. Okay, and I believe this is names from and then values from. I'm going to select it down here. So the names are from month. Would that be in quotes? No, I don't think you need to put quotes. Month. Values from total rev. Great. Now we're going to see the table being super wide, I'm hoping. Yes. So we unfortunately have like column names being numbers, but they're in backticks, so they're okay to access that way. And you can actually, even in GT, access them by like just like quoted numbers. So it's not too bad. So now we have this, we're going to pipe that into GT finally, and we'll see how this looks. I'm going to bring this up so we can actually see the table. Okay, great. So now we have a GT table finally. We're going to make this a bit wider. So now we can see that we have all this stuff in here, which is great. It's a bit long, but we can totally change this. One thing we might note is that the structure is fine, but we have things which are great for grouping. We have like names here for rows, and we have groups, which are the countries. So in the GT call itself, we have row name call and group name call. We're going to use both. So for row name call, we're going to use in quotes. It's going to be IAP type. And for group name call, it's going to be country. Great. Okay, so now running this, it gets arranged a little bit differently. So now we have it like this, which is kind of cool. So now we have countries like this. They're not arranged in a way that we maybe want it to be arranged, but we can sort of fix that. Okay. Oh, also, I don't want maybe all these countries here because we do have a countries considered. So we didn't actually filter before, but that's cool because like with, with this code, we can definitely just like change it and then like, it's all good. So I think it's country at this point. Yeah, country in countries considered. Yeah, we'll join it with pipe. Now this table, because we're just running this code, should be plus countries now. Great, that's perfect. Okay, so now it's like less big of a table. It's kind of like focused a bit. Okay, so now we have this. We're going to continue on. So now we have a table at least. So we're in table territory in GT. Now we can do all sorts of things to like shape it while we're in the GT API. One thing you might want is like the countries to be in order that we want, just because we decided beforehand, these are largest, more important at the top in terms of revenue. There's actually a function in GT that's maybe less well known. It's called row group order. It's just for changing the order of like these row groups. And you just do that by a vector of the names of the row groups. And luckily we have that. It's basically just countries considered. Countries considered. Great. So now if we run this, we should get it in the order. Yeah, exactly. US, GB, DE. Perfect. That's what we want. And this is important. Sometimes you want it in exactly the order you want, and it's kind of frustrating to put in that order. There's other ways to do it beforehand, but this is a nice, easy way of doing it in GT. Great. So we have row group order. Now we're going to do a ton of stuff just to like make the table present well. And that's lots of things. So one thing we might do is format the numbers. So they're actually in currencies. Right now, this is just like USD amounts, but they don't look like that. So we'll use format currency. And the cool thing about that is you can just use columns equals to everything. And then all columns which are here in the body will be formatted as such. And you do have like this currency argument, but it's already set to USD, so we don't have to do anything there. One thing we might do is we don't really need the pennies involved, so we just might say use subunits equal to false. And let's see what that looks like. All right, not bad. That's pretty good. That's more what you want, because like these are big figures. You don't really care about the cents. It's kind of like, it's just rounded, essentially, in this case. Good. Okay, so now we have that formatting in place. If we scroll down, we see we have some NA values. So while we're doing formatting, you can actually use a formatter called format missing. So it's FMT missing. And if you just use that on everything, so the first argument is columns. I just use that everywhere. Okay, so you use everything. And then what it'll do is it'll go in and find every NA and just use the default replacement text. You can set it, but by default, it's this M dash, which is quite nice. Again, you can set with any word, you can use Markdown. It's totally up to you, but the default is pretty good. Okay, so that's format missing. Another new feature in GT, which is kind of cool, it's basically in the last release of GT, is you can take these row groups and make them columns. So it's a little hard to access that. It's actually in tab options, but I'm going to show you how to do that. So it's actually tab options, and tab options is just got so many different options that you probably want to tab to see what they are. You can actually search, do a fuzzy search in here. The option that we need is row group. There it is, as column. And then you just use a true. By default, it's false, but we want true in this case. Okay, so now it looks like this. So we have row groups, but now they're to the side, and it kind of displays nicely because you just have like this, just sort of like these groups, these bundles of rows, which are nice. Great, so now we have that. The thing we gotta do now is take those numbers in the top and make those month names. And we have that, which is great. We have this month names list right here. And what you can do in calls label, which is the thing you use to relabel the column names, is you can pass in a list. So it's like this dot list argument. So that list will be this right here, this month names list. So if you just pass that in, I believe that's all you got to do. Let's run this. Yeah, now we get the months as like these short 3-letter months, which is great. Better than numbers, I'd say. Okay, so we have a table that's looking like it's developing pretty well. One thing we can do, and it's always fun to do that, is add some context to what these months are, or maybe there's special things about these months. So you can add spanners above column names. We do have a tab spanner right here. And just some news, if you're using the development version of GT, we now have the ability to have multiple spanners. Previously, you can only have like 1-level spanners. But if you're using the development version, I definitely encourage that. You get multiple spanners, which is great. And I'll show you how to create multiple spanners in a very logical and easy to use way. So tab spanner, the first thing we want to do is, well, say what year this is. I know it's kind of ridiculous, but we'll say this is label 2015. And this is like fake data. I just gave it a year 2015. I don't know why, but that's what it is. So we'll use columns. Okay. And we'll span this over every column with everything like that. Okay, 2015. Great. Okay. And since this is fake data, I can just make up stuff everywhere. We'll add some more spanners. And we'll just say like the first 3 months, there's a certain version of like this game out, like version 1.0. So we'll call this label v 0.1. And the columns won't be everything. They will actually be C and backtick 1, 2, and 3. I'll show you 2 styles of doing this, but these are actual the names of the columns themselves in the original data. Okay, so I'll get rid of this. And we'll see that this now appears over those first 3 columns, which is great. So now we want to do the rest. What version was the next one? I think 1.2. They skip 1.1. We'll just put that in. Okay, so 1.2. And we can access columns in a different way. We can just say 4 to 12. But they can't be numbers. They have to be character. So we'll do this right here as character. Great. So that just so you know, it gives you this. So if you run the whole thing, we now get this. Great. Now we have like 2 levels of spanners, which is kind of cool. It gives you extra context about like, this is 2015, these are the months, and this is some extra information about what version of the game was out during these months. Okay, great. Now we have that. We should put a header in this table so we can identify and just give it a nice title and subtitle. So we do that with tab header. And there's 2 things we put in here, a title and a subtitle. Subtitle is optional, but it's always nice to have. And we'll call this revenue amounts by country, IAP types. We'll just do IAP type. Great. Subtitle, we can make that, we can use Markdown. So inside here, we can have Markdown text, and it'll be formatted as such. So we'll say this considers, so this will be bold, top 8 countries by overall. We have to close this off. I'll put this down below for clarity, like so. Let's run this, and we'll see a title. Looks good. Markdown did carry over, which is nice. So I have an extra paren. I'll get rid of that. One thing we can do is if this is like not enough space between like, like the rest of the table, we can, because we're using Markdown, we can throw in some like line breaks. So BR like so. You have to put in 2 to actually force like this, the amount of area. But we'll see if this is good. Some people may like this, have a little bit of extra breathing room before we actually get to the table. So that's a nice little trick you can use. Great. So now we have the header. We could do things like there's these opt functions, like opt align table header. You may want it to the left. So there's an option here just to align it to the left. I mean, it gives it a nice look. As long as you style everything else to be sort of like, to go with this, it could be good. Okay, one thing we're missing is this large gulf of space. We don't have to put anything there, but it's kind of nice to put something there. It's basically it's called, this is the stub essentially. So this is called the stub head. We can actually just put a label there, and we can also use Markdown just like we did before to do that. So this is tab stub head, and the only argument is label, and we'll use Markdown, and we'll say region and IP type. And again, if you want to force a line break, because we're using Markdown, you can do it right in the middle here if you want. If you just want to guarantee that this breaks there. So let's take a look here. Great. Excellent. So, okay, so we got that now. Now we can style this thing quite a bit, because right now it's just like a plain table. I mean, it looks fine, has all the information, but there's not a whole heck of a lot of style here. So let's style it a little bit first, and then we'll get into like coloring the data as well, because that's always fun and good to do. Okay, so we use tab style. This is the thing where you target different areas of the table and you apply a style. Okay, so in this case, I just want to make all the text a little bit smaller in the body of the table. There's kind of overwhelmingly large, so I'm just going to do that right now. So I'm going to say it's going to be style, cell text, and we'll say the size. There's a bunch of arguments, but size is one of them. But here's the list of arguments. And this is like an HTML thing, like a CSS thing. You can just say smaller, and it'll just make it a bit smaller than the default. And with tab style, you always have to put in locations. So in this case, I will use cells body. If you're targeting all the cells in the body, you have to put any arguments. It's already targeting everything. So let's run this, and we'll see that this becomes just a little bit smaller. Yeah, and now it actually fits like width-wise into like, because right now we're just sizing everything by like the size of the content. But now making it smaller makes it a little bit nicer. Like these are a bit larger. These are maybe less important, especially as you color the, like the cells themselves, they become a little bit less important. Okay, so now we have tab style. We did that. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna color all the cells. So we're gonna use the call, like the function called data color. Okay, really kind of tough to use. I always recommend going to the help data color, like so. I mean, I could barely remember how to use it because it involves using scales functions inside of it for the colors argument. Okay, luckily there's examples in here and they show how they work, but it's always a bit of a challenge, even for me. Okay, but for this, we know we need a few arguments that we see here. So we're going to use columns first. We're going to consider all the columns, all the body columns in the table, which is great. And then we're going to use scales, column numeric. That's a function from scales. Palette. Okay, this is going to be a little bit strange, but I'm using two greens. And the first green I'm going to use is 66FF. I'll make that capital FF 00. And this is a little bit strange. I use the same color for like, the high amount, except I'm going to use alpha. The strange thing about like alpha in scales column numeric is you don't provide an alpha value, you provide true or false. And where you provide the alpha thing is right here in the color itself. So you can make color names like have an alpha part. So 0 alpha is there. So this is like the low value. And the complete opaque one is FF. Okay, very strange the way you do it, but it makes sense. It just says whether you consider the alpha part of the color. Okay. Okay, great. So, and also we're going to choose an NA color, just a random color. Let's see. Okay, maybe one more F and 66. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, good. And what else? Oh yeah, the most important one is domain. And this is where you can choose the limits, like the range of like where the colors go. If you just want it to be the data itself, you can just use null. Okay, that simplifies things a bit. Okay, is that it? I hope that's it. But yeah, it seems like that's it. So you need to provide columns. You need to provide like a function here. This argument is called colors, unfortunately. But if you have that, then you're good to go. So I'm going to like run this and hope that it just works. Okay, it does, which is great. So we can see here that like the values here are colored. Dark greens are like high values. These are like, like low, sort of like almost transparent greens are like less values. So it's just a way to sort of map around, see if revenue has grown during, months that we've, like had the game. And, in which regions like the revenue is not so great, you see here. And the NA color is right here. So basically any NA values are in this color. So that's good. Otherwise, I think it'd be a dark gray, and maybe that's just not driving with the color scheme here. Okay, so that's data color. Great. So now we're going to do things like fill out the table a bit more. So we're going to add source nodes. So you do that with tab source node. And for each source node you add, you basically make a new call of tab source node. Okay, and the argument here is source node. And again, you can use Markdown for this. And we can just say like the source of the data. We just got, this is all pretend. We'll just say all revenue figures obtained from daily retrievals from the, again, we have Markdown, so we'll just say API is a period. I believe that closes it off. Let's run this. Okay, then we have to go right to the bottom to see it. There it is, which is great. And this is italicized, which is fantastic. Okay, so we're going to keep going with this. We'll add another source node just to show you that you can add a whole bunch, and they go in the order that you specify them in. And this one we'll say, yeah, I guess we'll start with all. Just gonna like get rid of this. Yeah, all reporting shown here was created by the, and again, you can use like crazy Markdown like this, italics and bold. We'll say central data science team. So let's run this. And again, we'll scroll to the bottom and see that it was added and it's in the same order, which is wonderful. And we're going to add some footnotes now. We're just going to fill out this footer. And then we can sort of see that, like interesting things could be like shown there. And like you can have footnote references in the table. And, it kind of like adds a bit more context where you might need it. So just tab footnote. In this case, you need an argument, which is footnote and locations. So it's kind of like tab style where you need the locations. So I'm just going to put that in for now. But the footnote here might be, well, let's maybe like put footnotes on like where there's like missing data, and we'll explain it. I think that's not a bad idea. Okay, we'll say that these figures are $0 or less. We can say due to refunds. Yeah, which is totally a possibility. And locations. So if you have multiple locations, like we have two different columns, we can make a list of locations like so. And we just, separate each of the like cells calls with a comma. Okay, so cells body, and we'll say first one is in columns equal to 1. That's our original column name. And we have to sort of like say which rows they are. And in this case, we'll say rows equals is NA and like so. Unfortunately, we have to do it twice because we have two different columns and we can't just refer to the column like in this rows expression. But, it's not too bad. That may change later on. So in this case, we know there's one in month 3, so we have to do this. Great. And hopefully this works. I'm going to run it to see if it does. Okay, it didn't complain. And we do see a footnote right there. Great. And we do see it in the right places. It's not anywhere else besides the NAs, which is great. I love that. Okay, more footnotes? Yeah, I mean, like just having one footnote is maybe not great. So we're going to add a few more. I know it's a little bit tedious, but you're going to love all the footnotes. I swear it's to you. Okay, tab footnote. Great. Okay. In this case, let's see, it was a good one. Something notable. Okay, right here, Norway. Like there's a huge jump in like the revenue. I mean, maybe we should explain this. Okay, so let's do that. Let's target this cell with a footnote and some explanation. So footnote is going to be, we'll make this markdown just for fun. A surprising jump in jumps in bold revenue from the previous month. Okay, period. And we'll put a comma. So on the outside. Is that right? Yes. And now we need a location. So we'll say locations is going to be cell's body. Columns will be the 12th month. Okay, and this one's a bit tricky because usually you can specify it by like the label here, but they're all the same, which is like makes it impossible. It's just gems gold offer, gems gold offer. Oh. Okay, so we can't do that. So we have to actually use an expression, and we have to like make sure it is just for this cell, which is not great, but we will do it. So we'll say rows is going to equal, because it's on that column. Basically just how we got the value. We'll just put the value in. Round 12 equal to 6278. Okay. That means, you know, I mean, I can't think of another way to do it. So, but this is not bad. This is not bad. Okay. So hopefully, yeah, I see it. It's right there. And it's nowhere else because no other value is that value. Great. Good. So now we have two footnotes. I specified, you know, in the order I wanted, and it just appeared in the right order, which is awesome. Gotta have it. Okay. Now we're going to add even more footnotes. Oh my God. But we can explain what these version numbers are. And I swear we're going to finish the footnotes after that. Because I like to have a bunch of footnotes because, you know, more numbers and we could do more stuff in there, like I said before. So tab footnote. Footnote is going to equal, we'll just say like and I'll put this in backticks. That'll make it a code font, like so. We'll say the version 1.0 build used the first version of the offer agent SDK, because we're going to explain that, you know, the offers were pretty bad up until like the second version came out. Just coincidentally, it's kind of like it picked up. So we'll say the offer system was broke initially. Okay, so we got that. Put a comma on the outside because this is the markdown part. Locations, and this will be cells colon spanners. And this is going to be spanners equal to exactly the label, 1.0. This is actually the ID, but the label becomes the ID. So, and you can specify an ID if you want, but usually you just want the label to be the ID for, you know, easiness' sake. Okay, we're gonna do the exact same thing. I'm just gonna copy this to explain the 1.2 part. And it's really just like changing this. We'll say the 1.2 build. What did it do? It added more. Well, it got better. Let's say it added more missions. Basically, get free DLC. More missions and had an updated offer agent SDK. Great. That's closed off, and we'll say spanners 1.2. That's what's called. Okay, so I'm gonna run this, and we should get way more footnotes than we've ever seen. 4 footnotes. Great. I see them here. 1, 2, and then there should be like a third here. Great. And then repeating 4s. And there they all are. Great. This is so good. I'm loving this table so far. I mean, it looks so great. I mean, oh man, this is fake data. I wish it was real data because like this is too good to be fake. Okay. Anyways, so let's keep going. One thing I like to do is change the widths of all the columns. Like just right away. I don't want to be left up to chance. Okay. So I'll just say everything is going to be 75 pixels wide. And let's take a look at that. This is something you do and you just adjust it all the time. Oh no, it does not work. Yeah. Okay, so you gotta be careful here not to use just everything. It's not a column name. Great, thank you. Yeah, now we should see, yes, this looks great. Now everything is that width, which is perfect. Here's a crazy trick. It's a trick where like you want to specify the column widths of these, but they don't come with column names really. You can just use a number, like 1, and now I'll actually refer to this, not this. It's a little bit strange, but with column widths, it assumes everything is a column now, and we're just going to change everything. So we do 1 and make this a bit smaller. So px50, comma. Okay. So now that first one should be narrowed down. We see it shrunk down a little bit, which is good. Okay. A recent version of GT added a bunch of new functions for padding. They're all in the opt series of functions. One's called opt horizontal padding. And we're going to do a thing where we scale it to be, like more padding. And I'll show where I'm going with this. Because we have like all the values like right butting up against the edge, a little bit of space, but we want to maybe center it a bit. I think it might look nice. So let's try it. So this will take all the data in here, basically all the cells. It will just sort of bring stuff in. See, now it's more toward the center, but it's still right aligned. It's kind of nice. And this is actually brought in as well. So everything lines up. It's really nice. Like everything's one function. It just scales the padding. And this can be between 0 and 1 as well, if you wanted, to be like less padding. So that's how that works. Okay. While we're on the padding tip, we just use opt vertical padding as well, because why not? And we'll try to get this like a little more dense. So we'll say the scale in this case is smaller, but we want less padding in the vertical direction. Okay. So we should see a bit of a tightening, which is great. I'm going to make this a bit bigger so you can see more of this. Good. This is really shaping up. Okay, so we did the padding thing. And now we want to do even more style stuff. It's, I guess we'll do some more tab style. Because I think what we want to change now is the row groups themselves. Yeah, we want to maybe differentiate like these like categories. So let's do that right now. So we'll say tab style. And we'll make it on the locations, which equals to cells, row groups. And this just means all of them. And the first argument is actually the style itself. We want to change the text and the background. So we'll put them in a list. Make sure there's a comma. Cell text. We'll say the color of the text is going to be a CSS color called snow. The weight, we'll make it bold. And we'll align it to the right. It may not make much of a difference, but let's try it out. Okay, so we have that. Now we'll do cell fill. And now we want the color to be slate gray. I'm doing it in caps because that's how it is in CSS, but you can do it in all lowercase. It's the same thing. And we'll add an alpha. That's actually an argument here of 0.5. So it blends a bit nicely with the background we may add in the future. Okay, so let's add this. It takes a little while, but it's worth it. So now we have this. Great. Good stuff. Now we'll do another thing. There's like another opt function called opt all caps. It just adds a bit more style. It makes the surrounding Chrome in a sort of like caps type of style, like a small caps. It's not too bad. Okay, I sometimes add that because it's kind of nice. And now we can change the font with opt table font. And we can use the font, which is a Google font. And we can just choose a name. And I know there's a bunch. There's a few good ones. One I like is Carla. So we'll add that in. We'll see immediate change in the table. Looks really good. I kind of like this. And now to finish it off, we'll just add like a ton of like different options in the table because there's so many things you can do. I might go very quickly through this, but options, I recommend hitting tab. You can search through. There's little descriptions here. But we'll just change things to make things a little bit nicer in the table. So we'll do table background color there. And we'll choose lemon chiffon. Great. Okay, good. That's maybe a bit too bright. One thing we can do, we have this function in GT called adjust luminance. We can wrap the color in it, and there's an argument there, which I believe is called steps. And we can make that 2. And this could be totally adjusted to suit what you think is good. Okay, great. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see the rest. Okay, great. So that's that. I'm going to make even more options here. So heading background color, I'm going to do the same sort of thing, except I'll just keep lemon chiffon without the change. Another thing I'll try is footnotes background colors. I'm just changing a bunch of background colors here. I'm just going to put them in here and then change them all at once. Okay, footnotes, and then I want source notes background color. Great, just prepping it up. What else could we do? We can just copy this here and just change the amount of steps. It's not a bad thing. Then we have a variation on like one color. So in this case, I think I might bring it back minus 0.5 and maybe the same thing here because they're actually separate locations. I'm going to run this so you can actually see what's going on there. And we'll zoom to the bottom so you can see what colors have been changed. Okay, so right here it's a bit darker. It's kind of like almost similar to this. Great. Okay, a few more things, and I swear this will do it. So you might want to do a thing where you cap the table on the top and bottom. You can change the table border, like the very top and bottom border. So I think it's table border. Let's do top width. Yeah. And we can use the function px to define pixels, just put it there. And we do the same thing with the table border bottom width. Sorry. Great. So now we have those. Okay. Another thing we do is footnotes. There's this multi-line option now in GT. Right now, there are multiple lines by default. We can just say false, and they'll appear as one paragraph, which is kind of cool. Another cool thing we can do is table body, H lines style. We can change the style of the lines themselves because there's quite a few lines. We'll just make it dotted. You can also do dashed, and solid is the default. What else? We can change the heading title font size. Do something pretty big, px 30, and we do the same thing with the heading subtitle font size. Make that a bit smaller. This just bumps up in size. Okay, after all this, let's take a look at our table. This may be the final table. I mean, I did a lot to this, so let's make this a little wide. We sort of see what we've done. This is now huge, but it's nice because it's a bit bigger than the rest. It makes it more title-like. This looks pretty good. See the dots? There's different sizes of dots. A little hard to see because the contrast, but it sort of lightens things a bit. And again, we have the footnotes. They're all one paragraph. Just for the footnotes part, source notes, you can change the way that is laid out. But in this case, we did not do that. We just have them as separate lines. It's multi-line equals true, but we can set that to false if you want a paragraph. Yeah, and this is our table. Not too bad. If you have real data, it's even better. But fake data is always great to have because what are you going to do? You don't have data. You need to get some. So, okay, so that's my that's my GT demo for today. Hope you enjoyed.